Everybody, this is Program 7, How Do You Earn Your Own Respect? I am Jessica Duell, your host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. And today in this program, I've got two amazing people, Tanya and Joelle. And guess what? We're going to meet them in just a few minutes. But for right now, how do you earn your own respect? We run, we act, we respond. Sometimes we're moving so fast, we don't even check in with ourselves. And we're usually the last people to know, which is a little hard. It's a little hard when we're running and serving and acting and taking care of everybody else and even taking care of ourselves to actually really check in and go, how do I earn my own respect? Do I even respect myself? Because it is something that when we lose that confidence in ourselves, when we lose that respect of ourselves, it doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter how we act. There's an underlying current that those around us are going to be able to sense and feel and experience. They might not know what it is, but they'll know something's a little off. We're talking about our responses to others. We're talking about when we choose not to observe the way people respond to us or listen to ourselves as the words just keep spewing and spewing out of our mouths. And it's those times when we don't live up to being a leader. I pulled two definitions, self-respect as a noun and respect as a noun. Self-respect is a noun, pride and confidence in oneself, a feeling that one is behaving with honor and dignity, also known as self-esteem. Respect as a noun, a feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements. So if we take a step back, ponder on that for just a minute, right after this, we're going to answer the question, how do you earn your own respect?
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Duell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Everybody, this is Program 7, How Do You Earn Your Own Respect? And the Voice of Bold Business Radio as your host. I am super excited to have Joelle Dawson and Tanya Bork join me as our panel for today's conversation. How are you guys?
Hello, everybody. I am great.
Woot, woot. You could be a fly on the wall before the show started. We had things flying around like Alicia Keys, who refuses to wear makeup, to we don't like smelly kitchens after we cook, to awesome traditions and crazy weirdnesses that each one of us has. So as I come into this conversation, this is actually my third cup of tea, and it's my third different cup of tea. I'm drinking a Pukka, P-U-K-K-A-T, called Cleanse. And I have no idea if it really cleanses or not. It just smells really darn good. It's a good mid-morning thing. So that's what I was working on right before I joined you guys in the green room before the show. What were you guys doing right before you joined me for the show today?
Well, I was talking to you about the lobsters and the smelly kitchens and all that kind of stuff. But I think you made a big mistake, though, when you said being a fly on the wall. I can't stand flies. I hope a fly does not come in my house because I'll be right in the middle of talking and then poof, gone. He's got to die right then and there.
Right then,
I don't have any, so we're good.
Okay, now, so do you have like fly swatters in every room, or do you use
baseball bat or something? I don't
Oh
care
my
what
gosh.
it is. Have you seen the commercial with Aaron Rodgers and I think Clay Matthews? They were sitting in the locker room. I think it's an Allstate commercial. It's an insurance commercial.
Okay.
And he's in the locker room and he's saying, "Not in this house. Nobody comes in our house." And then they switched and he's in his apartment. And guess what's in his apartment? A fly. So he picks up a golf club and it goes through the window.
Oh my gosh.
That's me when it comes to flies.
Okay.
He's got to die right then and there. I don't care. When I got a shoe, a baseball bat, something.
And you're fast enough.
Well, I'm persistent.
You're persistent. Oh, that is a good word because also diligent then, like in Karate Kid where he's getting him with the
chopsticks.
Yes, exactly. How about you, Tanya?
Me, I just picked up my son. He wasn't feeling well at daycare, so I was just checking up on him.
It works. It still works after all these years. Way to go, son.
I hope he's feeling okay. And I know down days, we actually hit that wall. We're just far enough into school and just close enough before the first day off of school that we had nothing but unexpected behavior things show up, because the mental stimulation and the emotional stimulation and the physical stimulation of what it means to have new responsibilities and in a new place, that it really comes down to play. And there's a grace that I have to give myself as the mom to recognize that's what this is. My kid is tired. He might be hungry. He might not have the words to talk about what he's actually got going on, but I'm seeing something's happening, and how you deal with that. So being able to have some space is pretty nice. I tell you what, Tanya, how are you holding up as a mom of a little one?
It's kind of hard. He's getting to the point where he's the boss of everything, and every other word is no.
Oh yeah.
Tanya, how old is he?
He's 2 and 3 months.
Okay, just to let you know, when he turns 3, he's a man. Just to let you, we've been. But it's not 18. That's I don't. That's the law that the state. They all know. Men become men at the age of 3 years old. Just to let you know.
And by the way, it's crazy. And here, I'll give you some scientific things behind that. There are, in addition to puberty, when testosterone goes crazy inside the body, the first testosterone spike happens right around 3 years old. And it's insane. You have no idea what just happened or why. Now, I grew up with sisters, so I had no experience with this whatsoever. And I came downstairs one day and I was like, Ryan, what just happened? And where did Carter go? And he's like, oh, it's okay. It's just a boy thing. And so I waited it out, and yeah, it became our new norm, but it's still okay. But that's very cool, Joelle. So, I tell you what, well, now we're talking about giving each other space, and we talked about the definitions of self-respect and respect in the introduction. So I'm curious, let's take 2 minutes each, or a little less if you guys have a little bit less to say at the start. How do you earn your own respect?
Well, I'm the type of guy that likes to let ladies go first, so
Okay.
Tanya, give it a whirl.
All right. I think for me, it's when your values and the work that you're doing and everything that you're projecting reflects those values. So the moment that you're going against your own values, whether it be in a business deal or whether it be at home, whether it be with family, that is the moment that you lose respect for yourself. So I think respecting yourself has a lot to do with, keeping towards your own values.
Okay. Yes. You could have taken the words right out of my mouth, almost verbatim. Birds of a feather, right? Birds of a feather. All right, Joelle, how about you?
Wow. I've always been a pretty confident guy, but certain things can happen in life to where you can really get the rug just yanked right from under you. And that happened to me a couple of years ago. I was in a speech competition. I was on the road to the 2014 World Championship of Public Speaking. Mm-hmm. And I was brand new, didn't know anything, but I just knew I was going to win. I just knew it. I had a spot right here on my desk for the trophy. I knew I was going to win. You hear me, Jessica?
I hear you. I knew it. I know it too.
Yeah, but it didn't happen.
Oh.
And self-esteem right out the window. And I found myself in a position where, I was embarrassed, very vulnerable. I didn't have any confidence at all. Now, this was all imposed by myself. I did this. Mm. But I realized that, this was something that I had to overcome, mm-hmm. because my business suffered dramatically from that. It really did. So, in that feeling, it's not as easy as people think it is when you don't have respect for yourself to just say, oh, I respect myself. Done. It doesn't work that way. It really doesn't.
Right. How does it work?
Well, it's tough. It's hard because what happens is you retreat back to your comfort zone. Now, whether that's good or bad, the things that you were comfortable doing, and a lot of times that can be on the wrong side of the tracks, if you know what I mean. But it's what you're comfortable in because you don't want to be hurt anymore. You don't. So all of these opportunities that are outside of your comfort zone, they're not worth it anymore. What's worth it to you is just that, to be in a place to where I'm accepted. Well, I have this certain level of respect and comfort. That's normally what happens.
Okay. What do you think about that, Tanya?
I think it makes a lot of sense. If you go after any major loss, you want to avoid getting hurt again. At the same time, you need to build yourself back up to where you're feeling that you can go after these big opportunities or these things that seem kind of like out of your range right now of what you want to handle. So a lot of us go through that on a yearly basis with either small loss or big loss. I think for me, there were times where I thought that I was up for promotion or I was up to do something. I was up to win this big project or this big deal, and it didn't happen. So everything happens for a reason, and then you kind of rework that idea of trying to figure out where you're going to go from here, how you're going to do it. And at the same time, you're hurt inside. You haven't lost respect for yourself. You're just wondering, why doesn't everybody else respect me?
Okay, so, oh man, you guys, you just set up this minefield. We could go in any direction and have an amazing conversation. How dare you?
You ask.
I know, right? It all starts with a really good question. And I was looking back in preparation for this show and thinking about an experience that I had that really rocked my entire world. And I have to tell you, it was when I was a senior in high school. And as a senior in high school, we all have communication patterns from when we're a kid, and we bring them into adulthood and we keep trying them out, and we either let them go because they served us really well, or they make us more like our mom and dad, and they're more like the parts of our mom and dad that we love. And we let go of the parts that we pick up that are like our mom and dad that we didn't like so much. Or maybe we become them unknowingly. Who knows, really. And when I was a senior in high school, I was a Girl Scout still. I went all the way through. They didn't have daisies when I was a little one. So I started in first grade at Brownies and went all the way through to high school. And my troop had 3 people in it as seniors. And we actually also tended to be best friends. Well, a triangle of any kind usually is kind of lumpy and hard sometimes. And we had a falling out. And so none of us finished our gold project, which is the equivalent of becoming an Eagle Scout. What's their project? Do you guys know? What is their?
No idea.
Highest project? Okay, so I'm talking about, anyway, Scouts, I apologize. I really should know that. So as an Eagle Scout, you do your Eagle Scout project, and it's this service to community. Girl Scouts is a similar fashion. And what happened was our leader, which was one of our moms, and each of us, we got so rooted into what we believed and what we thought was right and what we thought everybody else should do because we knew each other so well. We got in our own way and we failed at that project. And when I look back and I think about it, I was not respectful of myself, because for me, earning my own respect is also recognizing that somebody else is going to have a completely different story with a completely different set of experiences with a completely different outlook based off of those things. And if I am unable to listen and be present and let them be who they are, I'm really working super hard at pretending to be somebody I'm not. It's my first cue. I'm being somebody I'm not when I get so steadfast in an opinion, nothing else matters except for my opinion and that I'm right. How would you guys, and looking back, that's what I took away from that situation. I was like, oh, I didn't respect myself enough to see. I didn't know, and I didn't have the skills to be able to move past it. And that's okay. That's what happens when you're young. You fail, you learn skills, you get to model. You might do it differently when you're 38 instead of 18. That's the way that it goes, experience. But what do you guys think about that in relationship to, I know, Joelle, you were talking about being embarrassed and vulnerable as part of that too, which is where I was. And I just refused to see it. I just said, nope, my way is the way.
Right. Tanya, you want to go first or you want me to tackle it?
You go ahead.
Okay. Well, it took me a long time, but the one thing that I had to focus on was, it was the journey. It was a journey. So I have a decision to make. Either I'm going to stay where I'm at, where I'm comfortable, or I'm going to get up, pick myself up by my bootstraps, and continue on my journey. Oh, that's easy. No, it's not. It's not easy at all. If you look at your case, what you were talking about, Jessica, these were your friends, but it's not as easy to open up that dialogue to discuss those things again if you know you're right. Whether you know you're right or not is what's in here, and you don't want to get hurt. You don't want to be wrong.
Right. Right. It affects your identity a little bit. And I think that's where, when we become so rigid, we're protecting something, but do we even know what we're protecting?
Right. So.
Yeah.
Ooh, this is really
We got deep here, didn't we? I know, right? Well, okay, so we were talking about, Tanya, you mentioned loss. And when you said that is what made that Girl Scout memory come back to me as a senior in high school. And to me, loss was, I missed out because I didn't have the skills, and I missed out because I was unwilling to see others. So when you mentioned loss and you were talking about your words and your actions reflecting your values or not, how do all those fit together? And do you see them associated with skills and a willingness to be aware?
So the one thing that a lot of people are not aware of, and I sometimes make this mistake, I often make this mistake, is I go after things that aren't very good for me. Whether it be a client or a project, or for some people it's a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's a habit. We go after things that aren't necessarily good for us. They look like they're going to be good, but when we never really dig deep into them to check if they align with our values, if in the long term or short term, what the goals are. So with a loss, if you think about, like for me, for instance, promotion, had I taken a promotion, I would have never opened up on my own. Would a promotion been good for me in the long term? I don't know. I don't think so, because it would have been another 5 years stuck in the same role. Versus, going out on your own, you have all the opportunity to grow. So sometimes we get trapped into these ideals or these situations where we think that the goals that we're going after are the right goals for us. And that's when we really have to take a step back. And this is how you earn your own respect. You figure out, well, what is it that I deserve? What is it that I need to do to get there? And a lot of times we're just not thinking about it. We're just going at 160 miles per hour and we're just racing at it. And then all of a sudden we hit a wall and we crash the car. And we're just not, and then we're sitting there and we're either, frustrated that we didn't, that we crashed the car, and we don't understand as to why. We never took a few moments to look back and say, this goal wasn't for me. This opportunity wasn't for me. And I need to find something that's a better fit.
Okay, and I want to take that and I want to dive right into comfortable. We call them comfortable chairs in our house, Joelle, and you've mentioned it a few times in terms of this is what we learned and these are the behaviors that we have that we know we're accepted in our tribe, and usually that's our closest family unit. Maybe it extends out to our closest friends and external, like our parents and our siblings as we're grown and doing different things. But I want to talk a little bit more about that in terms of comfortable. How can somebody find out if they're doing something that they've reverted into this place of comfortable?
If you're in a situation to where you're outside of everybody knows the difference. Everybody knows the difference. Perfect example, here we go again, public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. According to, most statistics that you're going to see, glossophobia is the fear of public speaking, and 97% of the people don't like to do it. They really don't. So if you're in your comfort zone, your center of influence, you're around people that love you, you feel secure, you feel loved, and there's a sense of belonging there. So anytime you step outside of your comfort zone or things don't go your way, and as I said, going back to your example, when things just fall apart, so to speak, you revert back to that comfortable chair, that comfy chair. Because you know what? You're loved here. Don't worry about that. You know what? Maybe that opportunity wasn't for you. We'll justify why we didn't achieve this. And it doesn't matter what is right or wrong. It makes sense to us mentally. And as long as we can justify it, then we're okay sitting in that comfy chair. That's just how we are as human beings. I'm a big believer in Maslow's law, okay, his hierarchy of needs. There's 5, but 4 are considered needs. Your physiological needs, which is, food, shelter, water, tea for you. And then you have, your security is a need, love and belonging is a need, self-actualization is a need. All of those things are needs. Your circle of influence right now is where you get all of those needs met. When things happen on the outside of that circle of influence, the first thing that happens is you draw back to that comfy chair. Because remember, it's a need, it's a human basic need. Just like the need to be right in your case. Right,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so let's take that need to be seen in that comfortable chair, and we justify it ourselves, but so does our tribe. Our tribe is the first group of people that will make us feel better for who we are, even though we went out on a limb or we did something different or something really unexpected happened. But what if we were being called to do something different? What if we knew we were being called to do more? We were called to make this change. And then all of these things happen and we're feeling we want to revert back to comfortable. We want to recognize that we have a loss and we may do something, whether that be, food, relationship, otherwise, that act out in some way, if you will, about that loss, about that change. So how have you guys ever had an experience where you've been called to do something more and you had to go against what you thought was true for you because there was something more waiting, and then you also had to face the tribe, you had to face the people who look at you and see who you were, not necessarily who you're becoming?
Yes, big time. Being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, okay.
Being an entrepreneur, because I grew up in a family where everyone were employees, and to want to be an entrepreneur, that was totally different. Oh, no, you can't fail. No, don't do that. What you need to do, Joelle, is you need to go get a job. That's what you need to do. Because that circle of influence, that tribe, gives me the love that I want, gives me the security that I want. I took that as good advice. The pivotal point was to realize is I really wasn't looking for advice. What I was looking for was acceptance and love. Because think about it. A lot of people do this, and this is what stops a lot of people from going into business on their own. They tell their people, they start in their tribe, the people that love them, their mom, their dad, their spouse, their siblings. I'm thinking about going into business for myself. And what happened? And they just wait. And it's like, well, no, I don't think you ought to do this. I don't think you ought to do that. And what happens? You don't do it. You see, all of your needs are met here in this tribe, but that opportunity is out here. Right. So you're in the middle.
Right.
So what you want to do subconsciously is you want them to accept your idea. And when they don't, you revert back to that tribe, because as I said before, it's a human need.
It is. Well, you got through, you became an entrepreneur.
I sure did. And I'll tell you that later.
Okay, so we're going to come back to, I was like, you can't leave us hanging like that. You said something different, but I heard you distinctly tell.
Right.
Right? And so, yes, good. We'll come back to that. And I love that because it's true. And I also think there's an element of them being threatened also, right? So here, and we'll go back to my example. I was being called to do something more. I just didn't know how to articulate it. Kind of like whether, 2 years and 3 months or 5.5 years old, it doesn't matter. I'm 38 now, so 38 years old. Sometimes I just have to be right. And sometimes I know I'm right. And realistically, what I have to remember is, so are they from their experience and where they're being called right now. And if they're willing to stand up for what they're being called to do. Because I actually think one of our biggest issues is that people, they decide to stay comfortable overdoing what they're called to do, which goes back to what my definition of respecting yourself is. And at some point, as hard as it is and as painful as it is to rip off that Band-Aid and says, who really cares what anybody else thinks? Because if I really care what anybody else thinks, I'm really not ready to go. I'm not ready to do what it takes. I'm not sure. And realistically, I have to be sure. I have to say, I don't care how much it hurts. I have to say, I'm willing to be okay with alienation and to be able to move forward. So yeah. I don't know if that's an actual definition of self-respect, but that's the thing I know I see myself doing. I have a choir here. Is that what this is?
Amen.
That's great. What would you add, Tanya?
I think for me, there's a lot of there was a lot of family influence to do different things. If you think about the tribe, so I come from a family of entrepreneurs.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's a little bit different for me. My father was kind of resentful of me going to college and going and getting like several degrees and not joining him in the family business, or not opening up a business with him. So I ended up, doing that for a little while. I worked, but I came right back to entrepreneurship. And so now when I'm talking to him on the phone, he's telling me, there's nothing more greater than working for yourself. But at the same time, for me, I was so used to getting a paycheck bi-weekly and having all of the benefits and the perks of being an employee, that going out on my own was very scary. So I think I'm 6 months in business, and we've just finally earned some revenue after 6 months. So for me, it's been it's been scary. It's been a long road. Entrepreneurship is not for everybody.
It's not.
You have to be really strong at what you're doing and hang in there through the tough times. And there are times where you do feel like giving up, and then you go back to that self-respect. Am I going to do what I said I'm going to do?
Right. Okay, so I just have to hear the rest of Joelle's story. Come on, Joelle. Because I think it's a perfect lead into where I was going to navigate this conversation next. So take us into that path there.
Okay. Well, while I'm sitting here waddling in my own self-pity, which is what I did for a very long time, in my situation, you and I we've had conversations before where this was in 2014, whereas 3 years before that, I was homeless. So I really started thinking about how far I had came to that point, to feel the way that I did, to feel, to not have the self-respect because of that one event. And that's how I found out who I really was. So I said, is this where you want to be the rest of your life? And as you said, does it really matter? I had an end goal, and I believed at that time, even though I was in a state to where, I didn't respect myself because I had built up this big mountain that just didn't happen. I felt that I had a calling, which meant that I had to get out of my comfort zone. I had to, because the calling was more important to me than, just sitting where I was comfortable at, because I knew that there's no opportunities in your circle. You've been there all your life. There's none. You looked. There's nothing there. If you want opportunities, you have to reach outside of your comfort zone. So to make a long story short, I rededicated myself, and I gained my own self-respect because I was willing to step out again and start all over again. I started speaking again. I educated myself, and I worked as hard as I possibly could. And I gained my own respect just because of the work ethic, because I went from just sitting there to gaining that hunger all over again. In other words, I bullied myself. I made myself do it. And to make a long story short, as I said, this year, 2016, I found myself in Washington, D.C. with 98 of the best speakers in the world. And now, because of that hard work, hey, ranked as one of the top 20 speakers in the world.
Yep.
This is what I wanted back then. So in other words, this is a justification for all of the pain, all of the trials and tribulations that I've been through. This was my reward this year, but that would have never happened if I would have never taken that first step outside of that comfort zone, outside of that tribe.
So there's a belief there. And there was a belief that maybe there was a belief that you would either walk off a cliff and have wings to fly, or that the ground would be underneath your foot with each step.
Well, it was a belief. But my thing was this was something I firmly believed that I was called to do, number one. Number two, there was no failure. I just had to get good at it. I had to put in the work. I stopped looking at what could go wrong, and I started focusing on what's going to go right.
Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. And you mentioned work ethic, and we're going to come back to that because I think that that's a really important piece. Well, let's talk about the work. All the work that we do, whether we're going to stay in our comfort zone or not, which, by the way, I think if you're listening to Program 7 of the Voice of Bold Business Radio, you're taking away loud and clear that it's only in the place of uncomfortableness and possibly even pain that the stretch and the opportunity to change and grow and become what we're really supposed to be is what gives us our self-respect when we're looking at ourselves in the mirror. That's when we know we have respect for ourselves. So do the work, put in the work, take that first step. And I want to hear from both of you guys, how do you set a goal? What goes into the concept of a goal? And then after that, we'll talk about a SMART goal. How do you make a goal for yourself? What are the steps that you guys take?
Tanya, you want to go first?
Sure. So for me, I look at the program. I break it down into 3: program, project, task, goal. That's 4 rather. And they kind of go into that order. I guess it's a different thought process, but overall, the program is what I would call life. The project, there's different projects throughout life or throughout work. There's a task associated with that, and then there's a goal associated with that task.
Mm-hmm.
So I always try to look at the big picture and take a look. Does that goal meet the criteria for the program?
Okay.
And then does it meet the criteria for the project? And then does it align to the task? And so that's kind of how I look at things.
Okay.
Okay.
How about you, Joel?
Well, I'm a very goal-driven person. I like setting goals. And I always begin with the ending in mind. What is the end goal? And before I set a goal, I look at that goal and I say, well, is this, first of all, something that I'm willing to accomplish, something that I really want to accomplish? Because as with any goal, there's a lot of work that you're going to have to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of work that you're going to have to do. So whatever that goal is, I said, okay, well, I want to be this in a year, 2 years, or whatever. Okay, what do I have to do in order to get that? What do I have? What's the process? And I look at that process. I say, well, okay, is this something that I'm willing to do?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm willing to do it, then what is it that I have to do on a day-to-day basis?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I break it down into little bite-sized pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And that way it's a lot easier to accomplish. I know a lot of people say, well, I'm going to do this, woo, and then it never happens. Whatever your goal is, you have to make me, okay, I think it's best that you have to do something every single day to achieve that goal. It can't be just a bunch of work this month on one day, a bunch of work. No. You have to keep that in front of you. Mm-hmm. And the way you keep it in front of you is you schedule something every day that gets you that much closer to that goal. And if you do that, if you have it calculated out, then that goal is predictable.
Mm-hmm.
Predictable meaning if I schedule this out and I do this today, this the next day, this the next day, your checkpoint, whether it be at the end of the week, at the end of the month, you're right. You're going to see that you're right on schedule. I've always been the type of person where I would do 2 days work because I always like being ahead of schedule. But if at the end of your week, you're not on target, or at the end of your month, you're not on target, you have adjustments to make, either in the, the tactical part of it or the mental part of it, which means you haven't really bought into that idea yet. That goal is not worth it to you.
Mm-hmm.
But if it is, then it won't be a problem.
Okay, so, right. Okay, Tanya, what about you?
Kind of thinking along the same lines. We have to set goals that are achievable and that you can measure them. And you have to be able, there's something I learned in business school, which I can't remember the acronym exactly, but SMART goals are measurable, they're achievable. We can say that we're going to go to the moon, but we need to say how we're going to get to the moon.
Yep. Yeah, I don't remember what the S stands for, but T is time, A is achievable, R is something else. Right, exactly, the SMART goals. What'd you say? Realistic? Yeah. And what's the T?
Time sensitive.
There you go. Okay, so we've got the SMART goals. Well, I'm listening to you guys, and I hear Tanya's scenario and how she approaches things as I've got this structure and I put it in and I check off, I turn the knob and all these things fall into place. And then I know what I'm supposed to do. I know I'm simplifying this, but hang with me because there's a point to where I'm going with this. And then Joelle, you're like, I have this plan and I'm going to follow this plan and it's going to make sure it's going to be on my calendar and it's on my face and it might be because it's attached to my mirror and it's in my calendar and I'm emailing myself and I have these task lists every day. So that's very oriented to behavior, which by the way, act to plan, which is my hashtag. So love this. I take a little bit of a different approach, which is why I wanted to articulate the differences in those two, because now we're going to add a third flavor to the approach of goals. I decide I'm going to do something and then I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. So I take that great idea and I'm like, I literally work backwards. What do I have to do that? Oh, I don't know if I have the skills to do that. Do I know anybody? Maybe I know somebody that have the skills to do that. But does it really matter because I'm still going to get this thing done because I want it so much? Yeah. So I build a picture and I've got the picture of what this thing looks like. And as long as I know that every single day, every single week, every single month, I don't use a task list anymore. And I have a fairly full calendar. But what I decided was when I sit down to make my priorities, I only have a few goals I'm working on at a time. And if the things are important, but not in alignment with my goals, they go on a separate list because they'll be called on at some point in the future. Maybe they're going to become relevant to the goal that I'm working on. But maybe they're part of a different goal that if I have too many goals, I can't achieve anything, right? If you're spread too thin, nothing's going to move forward. So I really am selective about what fits into that vision. And then I figure out the tasks and the process and the milestones along the way. And each of the ways that now I'm going to switch a little bit because whether you approach it like Tanya or Joelle or myself, there are built-in feedback points. Built-in feedback points that we use, which is where the action plan comes in for every approach, and you guys may have something different. You may do this slightly differently. In the end, though, it's about collecting some information. It's about seeing a result and evaluating that result to, am I getting to my goal or not? Am I approaching my vision or not? Am I achieving my daily, weekly, and monthly milestones or not? And that feedback, I think, is really whatever way you approach. And I mean, heck, Google, how do you set a goal? And you're only going to get a Google of answers. So
that's pretty good.
Thank you. Thank you. And so whichever approach, though, the feedback loop, the evaluation, the course correction, making sure that it feels, making sure that it seems, making sure that the actions still are right and you're still being called forward. Because at which point in time you're not called forward anymore, it's not going to happen.
Right. I totally agree. And one thing I do want to say is if I decide to set a goal to get something accomplished, I normally do just one at a time.
Yeah.
I'm not a type of person that, as you said, being spread out too far, that's no good for anybody or anything.
Right.
So I'm normally very, very focused. I have the blinders on. If I'm focusing on this one goal, as I said a couple of years ago, that was my big focus. Of course, I did other things, but this is a goal. This is something that I will accomplish because I've made a decision and a commitment to myself. And to go back to what you were saying about the respect, and I respected myself so much when I decided, when I made that decision that I was going to get up, number one. Number two, when I actually started doing the work and the progress and started seeing the results. That's when my self-respect went through the roof.
I love that. And and my self-respect is the most when I am doing the work, when I am getting my hands dirty, and when I've got the awareness to understand where all the other moving parts that tend to be part of my visions, because I could have individual goals, but they're not nearly as fun as teams. So everything that I do has other people, which means there's an added level of complexity, which, by the way, can scale easily into an organization of, if everybody's willing to do the work and we're spread too thin and the company has 10 initiatives in a year, well, that means departments are going to have 3 or 4 on top of that. Now you're at 14 if you count all 4. And then you've got your individual development goals of the people you're developing and you're mentoring, and they may have 1 or 2 goals. Who can keep track of 20 goals when you're on the front lines getting your hands dirty every single day? Nobody, which is why the larger the company, usually there's one annual or 2 or 3 year vision project goal that is put into place. And then all of the things that happen around it become mini goals, if you will, for each department, for each team. Because, in the world of cross-functional teams, I'm not a fan of that word, but it's very descriptive and it gets the job done. When there are a certain kind of person in an organization that end up on every cross-functional team, and everybody wants them on that team, but then they get spread too thin. How can they get any of their own work done, let alone the stuff for the teams? And they become a bottleneck. These people are very necessary. They're very sought out. They're very skillful. They're very approachable. Yet when we're looking at teams, we have strengths and we have weaknesses. And when we have to recognize that the team doesn't have a weak link, there's not one person that's a weak link. The team is the whole chain. And when the whole chain is pulled, every single link has a weak point and every single link has a strength. And if we're at any point in time moving around and we hit somebody's weakness that we don't know about, that whole chain is going to break. And it may not be where we originally thought it would come from. It goes back to goal setting in that sense.
Awesome.
So do the work already. And get off your pity pot at some point. Call me up. Send me a thing. We'll have tea with my gigantic tea mug. Because that's an important piece of this too, is who can you talk to? Yeah, talk to the teacup. But who can you be vulnerable around? And that's one of the things, as a leader in an organization, and having managed right now, I have 4 employees, and there was a time at a different company, at a different stage of my career, that I had 20 people underneath me, and we were remote, and it was very interesting. It was very interesting, and we all kind of ran around and did our own things, and I just kind of made sure we were all going the same direction, and it seemed to work out okay. And there's a reason I was going that direction. But as soon as I recognized the goals were off course, it was time to help figure out why the goals were going off course and what these actions that we're taking that were actually changing the direction, what was the purpose. And usually what came out of that was we just had to shift. There was something in our feedback loops that made it necessary to adjust. And for whatever reason, even though the feedback loops got the information into the teams didn't always communicate as well as they could have. And so you would get clashes of personalities. And communication is such an important part, especially when everybody's got to be diligent. They are holding their head high. They're looking out at the great landscape, and they're also head down, getting the job done, being diligent about every action. And it's an interesting place to be, this world that we work in and the teams that we lead. And there are a lot of skills that go into that. Can you think of what are the top skills for a leader today when we're talking about self-respect? And we're going to shift a little bit of we've talked a lot about self-respect and how do we earn our own self-respect. And other people are going to see that. They're going to see we're being called to do something. They're going to see we have this boundless energy. They're going to see that we know what we're talking about and we're going to do whatever it takes. And we're inviting people to join us along the way. And it's up to them whether they join us or not. So as a leader, what are the skills that are necessary to make that happen? What do you guys think?
I think one of the biggest skills that anyone can have as a leader is communication.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to foster communication between yourself and your team. And this is one thing that I've always said, understanding how people are, and there's going to be conflicts. Everything is, when I was a leader, everything is my fault. Everything is, even if I had nothing to do with it.
Cheers
why?
to that. That's right.
Because you understand that if two people, have this some type of confrontation, the majority of that confrontation or the energy that's wasted is to say, okay, here my side of the story is his fault. Here my side of the story is her fault. If there's anything that I can do to put the blame on me, I know that at that point they can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
In your case, and I want to go back to when you were in high school.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
Girl
her
Scouts.
fault.
Yeah.
It's your fault. No, but as soon as that person says, it's my fault, or someone say, it's easy for me to accept the fact that it's your fault.
Right.
It's easy for you to accept the fact that it's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
As long as and that's just how we are as creatures, we always want to put the blame on someone else. As the leader, you have to understand that. You have to understand that if for somehow you can get past that hump of whose fault it is, even if it's my fault,
Right.
then they're ready to move forward. I've had situations where I've gotten two people to actually agree that it's my fault. And I had my sister come and say, how can it be your fault? You weren't even there.
It doesn't even matter. The point is,
you're right. It
That's right.
doesn't matter because now they're ready to move forward. But being able to create some type of dialogue to communicate with all parties and all employees and understanding their different personalities is key. Another one is listening, is what I call effective listening. The difference between listening, I hear you, and effective listening is a lot of times people hear you, but they're not listening. They're waiting for you to shut up so they can start talking.
Yep.
Active listening is where you actually take the time out to understand that person's point of view. And like the older people say, listen to me with your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they call effective listening.
Mm-hmm.
When you really, you seek to understand their position.
Yes, right. I have a friend who, her name is Karen, and we were having a conversation about listening one day, and she said, you know what? I am listening to the last word of every sentence. If I can hear the last word of every sentence, I know I've heard every word up until that last word, and to be more engaged. I think that's fabulous. I'm a big listener, big proponent of listening also. What would you add, Tanya?
Well, he hit it right on the nail with communication. I think that is number one. Aside from that, you really have to have empathy with your team. You have to be able to engage people in a way that you're influencing them to make the right decisions. You're influencing them to work together, and you're showing model behavior as a leader.
Nice. Okay. The only one I would add to those is, hang on, I got my whole list of skills right here that I reference.
One, and you have a whole list.
I have a whole list. Would be observing. I would add observing, because like listening and being an active listener and having empathy to influence, and all three of us agree that communication is really important for keeping the dialogue open, avoiding bumps, and stalling out completely. No movement is really bad. The concept of observation is there's always more to the story that people aren't saying. And so if we're really good observers, we're hearing the words, we're listening to what they're actually saying. So what are they not saying? And can we ask, through observation, we can ask questions. So I would add observation to this list. And each of these is a skill that is learnable. There are steps to do each one of these things. So how about if we pick the first one, since we all agreed on communication, what are your top tips to being open to communication? And this could be, we'll do it both sides. Self-communication, self-talk as well as talk outward, because I think they're going to end up being the same thing. The way we talk to ourselves tends to be the way we talk to other people. The way we treat our family tends to be the way we treat ourselves, kind of thing. So we can extrapolate that outside of our households, the place that we live, into the workplace, into where we volunteer and are involved in our community even.
Okay. That's two-part question, right?
Yep.
Me and then myself. Let's go back to the whole self-respect issue, which is what we started on.
Yep.
I started self-talk telling myself that I had a calling. I started telling myself that I'm one of the best speakers in the world. I had to get myself to believe that.
Mm-hmm.
I had to. And the only way that I could do that is if I kept saying it, kept saying it, kept saying it, kept saying it. Self-talk is very, very important, because as the old saying goes, whether you think you can or you think you can't, guess what? You're right.
You're right.
And you are. So if you keep telling yourself, I'm a good person, or telling myself I'm going to achieve this, or keep telling yourself that, wherever it is where it is you're trying to go in life, if you keep telling yourself that and you're doing the work, you will end up there. You will. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of time, because number one, you believe it. Another example that I give is, if you look at how many people want to start businesses and say, well, I don't know if I can. They're afraid to. They think they can't. Compared to someone who's been in a car accident, or who's been in some situation where the doctor says, you know what, you will never walk again. They have proof that you will never walk again, but if that person never believes it, there's too many people walking around here today that a doctor told them that they would never walk again. It's what you tell yourself that matters.
And it's not that the fear is not there in what you're telling yourself. It's that in spite of the fear is what I hear you saying. Yep. And
sooner or later, it'll go away.
Yep. Okay.
Now, as far as what you tell other people, if you have a team, you have to be the uplifter. You have to have that open line of communication. You have to be that person that uplifts them, because we know the majority of the things that are going on in the world is negative. We know that. You could be that one little bright spot in their life, just you. If you're always encouraging them, that's how you create a nucleus around you. That's what draws people to you. They want to be encouraged. They love that positive word. So as long as you're giving it to them, especially on your team, then you're going to always get peak performance. And we talked about that on another episode. That was the previous episode 6, right?
Yes.
We did talk about it and how to motivate people.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to give them that positive word, the things that you say to other people can really make a difference.
Yes. Cheers to that. Okay, everybody listening, this is all good stuff to say. Now try and actually do it. And just in case you haven't had enough yet, we're going to hear what Tanya's definitions and these tips are also for self and team. Go for it, Tanya.
I think with your team, you need to keep it simple. You don't want to overload people with a lot of information at once. And I think that's the most effective way to communicate. You want to keep it simple and clear, and leave room for questions. With yourself, I think the most important thing is we're not kind enough to ourselves. We're very rough on ourselves, and when something goes wrong or something isn't going to plan, we tell ourselves that we're not good enough, that that we need to do better. But I think just being a little bit kinder to ourselves each day can have that outlook come out onto others.
Oh, that touches my heart. I'm going to pretend you were talking just to me right then.
She was.
Yes, that's exactly.
It was just for you.
Just for me. And everybody who's listening, this is just for you too. We carry around a lot of burden that we don't need to. And it's learning how to shift that around through our self-talk and through our ability to encourage ourselves as well as others. Because when we're not a squasher, when we squash people down, people try and drag us down. When we lift people up, people want to lift us up too. And so it is an amazing chain reaction that way. And when both of you guys were talking, it's just so funny. I happen to have another book close by. I love books. You would see them all over my office. There's this book. We were talking about, overall, it comes down to simplicity. Can we do it? Can we buy in? And are we willing to do what it takes? And the more complicated it is, the less likely the more complicated it is. That's kind of like our self-talk for, Are you really sure? Are you really, really sure? I'm going to give you one more chance to say no. I'm going to really give you another chance to say no. Oh, I know you just said yes again, but here's a third chance to say no. We talk ourselves out of things. And one of the things, this book, Simple, Conquering the Crisis of Complexity, by Alan Siegel and Irene Exkorn, Etzkorn, another word that I wish I had phonetical spelling of, is people mistakenly believe that the more information equals greater clarity. And when we were talking about goal setting, and when we were talking about our definitions of respect, and when we were talking about now how we define communication, it all came down to the same things. There weren't 500 million things that we could have to get clarity. Less is more. Cheers. Good book to add to this conversation. And guys, our time has come to a close, and I'm kind of sad because I know I could talk about this all day with you guys, and you are on a roll and have so much more to say. Everybody who is listening and watching, this is Program 7 of the Voice of Bold Business Radio, and you can go to the website, thevoiceofboldbusiness.com, and search Program 7 or our title, How Do You Earn Your Own Respect, to find this episode and find other ways to subscribe to listen to our past episodes. By the way, Program 6 is awesome, as Joelle mentioned, and as are all of the other ones. They are worth the listen, and we want you to be in touch and stay on top of when our new episodes come out, so subscribe. And until next time, we want to know, how do you earn your own respect?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Duell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.